Hello everyone and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be covering a few different subjects, but all of them are tied into the end of May and early June. So this is going to be quite a mix of astrological analysis of different aspects. And I'm just going to mention, the big picture of what I'm going to be speaking about. So I'm going to be covering Saturn's ingress into the sign of Aries that takes place on the 25th, 24th, 25th of May. Then I'm going to be speaking about Neptune. Neptune is already in the sign of Aries. However, Saturn joining him activates this energy in a big way. So we need to speak about Neptune a little bit as well. Then also, well, on one hand, yes, the end of May, where Jupiter is reaching the end degrees of Gemini, that will be relevant in its own way. And then in the first weeks of June, more specifically on the 10th of June, it enters the sign of Cancer. So that's a very powerful energy shift that we're going to be feeling big time. Also, because as soon as it does, its entry move into Cancer, a part of the sky where it loves being. So it is an exaltation. It already starts squaring Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries, and that's a very, very big energy in so very many different ways. But of course, I'm going to be speaking about this in greater detail. Then we have to speak about Uranus a little bit, and this is what I'm going to be starting the analysis with. Uranus in the present moment, but also Uranus uh, in the first week of July, so the 7th of July more specifically, when it ingresses, it enters Gemini. That is also very, very powerful energy shift. But of course, before, so that leads to the end of May, June. It's in the last degrees of Taurus. That's very powerful, significant. Yes, we are going to be having a repeat of this energy when it goes retrograde, but that's a different story. I'm not gonna be covering Uranus retrograding back into Taurus in this video. That's gonna be for a later one. And actually, no, I'm gonna be speaking about what I wanted to mention just now when I speak about Jupiter more. So Uranus and the present moment, well, actually not really the present moment. We're going to the 17th, 18th of May when a really powerful aspect, not a rare, because this aspect happens once every year, but pretty special this year due to the overtone and the very strong karmic nature of this year. So it's rare in that sense. Uranus Sun conjunction. On one hand, as I said earlier, this happens once every year, and when it happens, it is that day, those couple of days when something really, really awakens us. In the past few years, that something was Taurus related. Our five senses, or our sense of value, sense of self worth, financial matters, financial decisions, or anything that is related to our feelings, especially value sense or love sense of our earthly or an earthly part of our lives. Also, this time it is, of course, the chain, so to speak, continues, but for the last time, because this is the last Taurus Sun Uranus conjunction. So this is the finishing touch. And it's revolutionary. It's full of epiphany. It's full of realization. It's full of truth. Now, this truth might not necessarily be something radically, totally new totally, alien to us in that sense. Because this is the finishing Uranus Sun conjunction in Taurus for in our lifetimes, I do believe. Anyway, it can also remind us of the big picture of everything that Uranus has been bringing up. I think this is the best word possible. Bringing to our awareness. So bringing up, highlighting, marking, screaming for us to look at in that area of our lives which is ruled by Taurus, or which is incorporated by Taurus. So for every person, what their chart shows specifically, but the collective expression, well, as I said earlier, our earthly selves, what it is that we embody, how we embody it, what that embodying did. Let's put it in the past tense, because this energy started coming online since 2018, 2019 in a more relevant way. Let me give you examples. Where is value in our lives in quite in an earthly way? Well, for example, skills that we might have and are not using. Sometimes those are obvious. Some other times those are not very obvious, because let's say, let me give you my personal example. I never met any of my grandparents. Any of my grandfathers, my grandfathers. So I have no real idea of what they were truly skilled at and what I would inherit from them. So if you're such a person like me, who knows what kind of genes were passed on to you? And many times Uranus, exactly the unexpected, the random, the coincidental synchronicity, why not? Or the push-pull tug of other people, social circle, etc. Or the climate of your financial life, Taurus, put you in situations where all of a sudden you discovered, look at me, I can do this. Or you were put in situations, regardless of how comfortable and uncomfortable they were, because that's Taurus, it doesn't necessarily like it, and Uranus and Taurus are not best mates. However, if there is a part of the experience where, oh, I did it, I was quite good at this, or look at me, how easily I overcame the situation, or it doesn't matter how I felt about it, I rose to the top. I survived. I managed. I showed a skill, a mastery, something deep from within, like an instinct, like a remembrance, like some kind of resonance where a gene may be activated, took over. And what did it say? What did it show? Where did it point the value at? So this is just one example of how it may make us recap what Uranus did in our lives from, as I said earlier, 2018, 2019, better said, onwards. So, until the present moment, of course. So this conjunction can very much highlight something like that. Something very personal, that fate, life, external reality, that's very much Uranus. The truth in our lives, the objective truth, has shown us in many unusual, outside of our comfort zones or outside of our norm patterns type of situation, in any way, shape, and form, in any way in our lives. But this also has, as I said earlier, a spiritual or philosophical nuance to it. How do we embody our higher principles? And it really comes down to not rigid faith or ritual or dogmatism, but rather, as I said, higher principles. it is really a principalistic Uranian energy. Uranus rules Aquarius. That is the highest thoughts that we believe in that empower us. That is not necessarily just the realm of faith. That is the realm of also logic and thought and how it makes sense to us, both individually and collectively. I'm thinking about an example, like everyone, both individually and collectively, would expect a celebration, a collective celebration, to have certain elements attached to it, like beauty, like, elevating something, like making a difference, marking in our own individual ways that it's not a day like any other. So this is just an example that is both individual and collective at the same time, and the two expectations kind of match. Now, the Virgo side of this, how to do it, doesn't match, and neither should it. But the higher idea that this must be a special day and I must somehow spend it in a special way, that the higher thought is kind of the same. So this is how it plays out collectively. So collectively speaking, we are gonna be, well, the sun, the luminosity, the awareness, becoming aware of some truths that might not always be all that comfortable or nice, because the sun, before it conjunct Uranus, it also conjuncts fixed star Algol, a notorious malevolent fixed star, which usually shows the ugly, the not so nice, the staring Medusa in the eyes, that which we don't necessarily want to look at. And because of Uranus, well, it's there, it's realistic, it's happening. Uranus is usually the the planet of the future and the now. So the now leading to the future, because it raises an awareness. So collectively, there is almost like guaranteed an ugly side of this as well. Algol usually signifies the head of an institution or a leader, a director, a boss, the head of something. So that's gonna come into the spotlight big time. One way that it already played out, so it's gonna connect to that. The Vatican, the new Pope, but that's so, well, expected in a sense. But because of Uranus, the new Pope is definitely gonna bring something new, innovative, Uranian, sometimes maybe radical to the table, because that's so Uranus. But it's also humanitarian. It's also for the people, because that's Uranus as well. The community, the people element, the individual, everyone matters. That's also Uranus. So this is going to be highlighted. But that, what I said is like a really lovely and positive example. I'm very sure that there are going to be not so nice examples where this energy, Uranus, the sudden, the unexpected, the also Uranus is when something is bound to happen. It's no avoiding it. Like when you are inflating a balloon and you don't stop, you know that the tolerance will end at some point. Or the typical volcanic eruption, or the typical, earthquake followed, seaquake, better said, followed by tsunami. It will come. It may be bigger, smaller, but something will happen. That's Uranus. So, and this energy, absolutely, it can play out into calamity as well, but because it's a solar energy, it doesn't need victims. It is more like spectacular. We're witnessing the raw force of nature. So in that sense. But this can also be where a leader falls something um, that is story and permanent, the norm, the usual, well, suddenly it no longer is. Something, as I said, falls. Value-wise, it's also pretty active because this is money energy, economy energy, um, agriculture, food. The reason why I'm mentioning agriculture and food is because Ceres is I do believe already in the sign. Let me check. Sorry, this is very quickly checkable. Yes, at this 18th of May, when what the date we're looking at, Ceres is already in the sign of Aries, and it's conjunct. Actually, it's sandwiched between Saturn and Neptune. That says a lot. Food, Ceres grain, Saturn in an erratic degree of the sign of Pisces, and we'll speak about Saturn just a little bit. Uh, Crisis, morality, humanity, of course, religion and stuff like that as well. But above religion is basically minimum humanity. Things that for simple fact that we're a human being, can't tolerate. We can't turn a blind eye to. So urgent humanitarian crisis. Well, I don't need to speak about this any further because it's obvious how it's playing out in so very many ways and so very many parts on the world stage. In many parts it's food, but in other parts like the United States, it is more like, well, what nurtures a citizen? Food, yes, that's one, but food is not enough. A citizen must also be nurtured, an individual, right? By higher aspirations, by, well, I'm using the United States specifically because, well, democracy, freedom, sense of dignity, sense that I live in a ultimately, how should I express this? Positive, beneficial, and good oriented world, society, community, my life, my bubble included. If that is not there, or if that is compromised, well, it's it's cutting off a food. Just that food is not for the body, it is for the psyche, the mind, the emotions, the heart, and even our illusions. Illusions, in this sense, the good type of illusions, the illusions that we need. And at this moment, Venus is not exactly, sorry, Venus is conjunct-ish Salasha, dwarf planet Salasha, Neptune's wife, the positive illusions in life that we need. Freedom of speech, that our opinion matters. It is an illusion because it cannot be 100% accurate to make it real. So even we have to expect that to just be a principle and remain a principle. But even if the principle is cut off, oh, it's not, we can't live without that illusion, can we? Then means that we don't even have the hope of freedom. We're just enslaved by, well, ultimately reality. And that's not good. That's not, no one wants that. No one needs that. Neither divine forces, neither earthly no one needs unhappy people. Nature doesn't want that either. So that's a big no-no. So where I'm going with this is that it's a crisis that will scream that it needs to be looked at and dealt with immediately. That's where I'm going. Uranus, action is not guaranteed yet, but Uranus is, and with the sun is the awareness. It's urgent. Speaking about action, if we are on this 18th of May, the action is a bit guaranteed by the Mercury-Mars square. Now, this is important because Mars is empowered, very comfortable in the sign of Leo. Mercury is in the sign of Taurus. Mercury in Taurus is, let's imagine this energy like the actual reality of the situation, especially that the Sun Uranus conjunction adds to this. Mercury is there, the mind, to process it and look at the crisis, right? The ugly for what it is, but also trying to figure out what to do, how to solve it. Uranus Sun conjunction helps into that big time because it's innovation, it's epiphany, it's outside of the box, it's genius energy as well. Why not? Prophecy. And Mars in the sign of Leo, yes, let's do it. The courage, the need, the urgency, the willingness to rise above any challenge, any obstacle. Mercury in Taurus needs to come to terms with that. So it's not an easy energy because of the volatility of this day. Communication, surprises, the unexpected, and I'm speaking about our personal lives here, can go either way. It can lead to shock, really. That's the best word here. Shock, unexpected, a moment of maybe fright, a moment of how am I going to be processing this? It can also be awkward. It can also be highly uncomfortable. However, it can also be very easily the opposite. A delight, a surprise, a pleasure. You'd never in a million years. Let me put Mercury-Mars square in a nice context. That your crush, let's say, am I using this Venus in Aries and Neptune in Aries is very much about sensuality and romantic stuff as well, but in an unexpected. This is in a real, down-to-earth way. That your crush makes a move and she did. What do you do now? Because it's totally unexpected. You never saw this in a million years. What do you say? What do you do? How does it make you feel? How does it change your immediate future? Right? That's a positive example, and it's still uncomfortable-ish, or it still came like a lightning strike. But let me put a more not so romantic context here. Your boiler broke. Neptune, Aries, hot water, broke. Well, it's not gonna be cheap. Mercury in the sign of Taurus knows that it's not gonna be cheap. But Mars also knows in the sign of Leo that you're not gonna go without, so there's no choice but to dig into the pocket. Or Uranus, do what you never thought you would be doing. Ask parents for help, I don't know, take a loan. Accept that friend's offer who always wants to help you and you phone them now, yes. Imagine the delight on their side having always been refused. That can also be the positive side of this energy. For your friend that they came and wow, finally I can do what I wanted for a long time. For that person, the friendship connection. Because there are so many people for whom this is the juice of their life, when they become the superhero for another person. and many powerful or power-built people, that's the delight of their lives. Being refused doesn't usually go in a good way, even though they respect it. Anyway, this is just a scenario, but this can also be much more dire where, well, I have to use my example. In my country, the political system is in total, utter, maximal chaos. So what can I expect in a finance? Why should I even plan finances? Or it's gonna be survival, guaranteed, 100%. So that that kind of shock, epiphany, realization that wow, we are in deep water coming from the collective. And as I said earlier, even if it's not necessarily financial per se, it's a value, it's a normality. The example of the United States, how much it is reflecting freedom and democracy and liberty and all of that in the present moment. And I'm not saying an opinion about this, because how can I have an opinion if I don't live there? I'm just saying what I'm seeing being said by many people, many voices, and the opposite is not really being said. So I'm just sharing with you how I'm perceiving this reality. No matter where I look, any information channel, may that be mainstream or alternative, I'm mainly seeing complaints or the unhappy side, not the happy side. Because usually one would expect every side to represent itself in a good measure, good chunk. So that's why I'm daring to say that people are questioning the value of, for example, the law, the constitution, a lot of things that are, well, Venus in Libra, really. Venusian matters, but in Libra, the principle of justice, equality, equity, fairness, morality, the human spirit. So these themes are very, very on fire, literally, in any way, shape, and form, in any part of the world, in any corner of the planet, in their own unique way. May that be something purely internal, external, aggression, war, anything. But no one is basically not feeling this type of energy. So that Mars square Mercury will force some kind of reaction, will force a decision at least. How do I respond? How do I react? Like always, when these two planets square each other or speak in hard intention, really, even in conjunction, think before you act. So take a step back, look at the situation, because not Mars, Sun, Uranus can help in that, because it's there. It's before your eyes. It's your mind has no doubt what it perceives. It's perceiving. Like, sadly, some people, is my house in flames? Yes, it is. I'm seeing the flames. I'm feeling the heat. This isn't a dream. So this type of situation, or let me give you the other. I don't want to be doomy and gloomy here. Did my crush kiss me? Yes, it happened. The perfume is still on my skin, or I don't know. This type of energy. So yes, it did happen. How do I react? What do I do? And if it's something not so nice, because Mars in Leo can be very feisty, confrontational, the bad type of courage, the egocentric, lashing out, strong survival, aggression. Let's just call it for what it is. So yeah, okay. it trines Venus. But that is a positive aspect in so very many ways, saying that the action, whatever Mars feels the need to do, to take the leap of faith, courage, risk, stepping out of the, taking action, the reaction, what I said earlier, well, that is rooted in something, emotion, Venus, value, love, survival, loving my integrity, like, my loving my physical body enough that I get out of conflict or step away from imminent harm or stuff like that. So a strong sense of value or feeling motivates this action, but that doesn't necessarily, nothing in this trine says it's elevated, it's thought out well. It just says that the lash out is there. And if that's violent, or if that's due to a verbal conflict, that's due to this energy is also so much insult. Because Mars in Leo, the heart, Mercury in Taurus, values. Square can be like an arrow into the values of the other person. You can imagine that it's not gonna go all that well. And another thing that I want to mention is that about Uranus, on the 7th of July, do we want to go there on the 7th of July? Let's go there. As it leaves the sign of Taurus and enters into the sign of Gemini, it is accompanied by Venus. So Venus conjunct Saturn in his moments of transition from Taurus into Gemini. And I find this so symbolic because Venus is the ruler of Taurus. And Venus herself kind of likes being in Gemini as well. It's almost like she's paving the way for Uranus, because this is a massive energy shift. Uranus in Gemini is free. It is not bound in chains or in great, how should I say, density like it was in the sign of Taurus. Here it is free. It is unbound, the realm of thought, the realm of imagination, the realm of fantasy. Not the Piscean expression of it, but the Gemini expression of it. Purely in the mind. Thoughts can go absolutely anywhere. Innovation, except I'll speak about this in a separate video closer to when it happens, but Venus being there really, really colors this energy. An innovation, epiphany, a new in value, in love, in what we want to learn, what we're interested in, what friendship means, what real interhuman connection means, like a demand that fraternity, sorority, Gemini, needs to be taken seriously, as in every human being needs to be a brother, sister to one another in philosophy, Anything that goes against that in this Aquarian paradigm that we already exist in collectively and individually is inferior. May that be religion, may that be dogma, ideology, our past. It could be even our past experiences that traumatized us. Even those have to be let go. We need to have the courage and the faith and the love to consider every human being a brother, sister, a smaller, bigger, etc., doesn't matter. Because Gemini doesn't mean to lose the individuality. It just means that in the higher picture, in the big picture, let's say, Everyone who is part of the same species, again, just in philosophy, should be like a brother sister to one another, which means to be treated as such. So let's not go into physical wars where people die anymore. Let's try to change that forever. Okay, it's an ideal, it's not going to happen today, but as long as the ideal becomes alive, we will progress there more and more and more, and this is very necessary. This is just one glimpse of Uranus in Gemini, and Venus makes sure that we feel it deep within actually the core of everything that we love, core of our heart. We really, really feel it. So let's move on to Saturn, because Saturn is a more important energy here. So let's go to the 25th of May. Oh. So the 25th of May, when Saturn ingresses into the sign of Aries. Now, this is important in so very many ways. One of the expressions of this energy is that this is the cycle. This is that 2.5 years. Of course, that 2.5 years, which repeats every 28, 30 years or so. But when the limit and what we can do and want to do is really in our hands. Aries is the self. Saturn is the limitation, the need, the responsibility, the solid. We can either look at it from a big philosophical perspective, whereas when spirit enters matter and it takes a shape and form. Yes, that its first stages, its embryo stages of its shape and form, because 0 degrees of Aries, the first degree of the zodiac, the creation degree. Exactly what I said earlier, when spirit enters matter and it takes a shape and form, the design of that. So it's very, very important, but we can also look at it from a very practical or very lower down to earth perspective when we actually start doing something, not just dreaming about it. Or Saturn, the solid structure. Let's identify it with a home. Well, as it enters the sign of Aries, we're already putting down the foundation of the house. It may be a long way until it's inhabitable or when we move in, but as soon as we start laying the foundation, it already signifies that the house, and it already gives us body and soul, strict human component of our being, but also the spirit of us, that we have every right to dream about, hope about, work towards the home, because we will have it most likely whenever we finish the construction. But the foundation is basically the solidification of the hope. That is what signifies that yes, hope is real and there is a lot to hope for. Anything in between these expressions goes. And also what needs to be said is that Saturn is not very strong in the sign of Aries, in the sense that this is when the universe, the divine, call it however you want, allows the individual to set their boundaries and limits. So Saturn, the collective feeling of it, the feeling that there is fate, there is karma, there is the authority in our lives, and everything that means, that we are subjected to it, well, actually, it is either as tough, as cruel, as unfair, as ruthless, or as permissive, freedom-loving, individual loving as the individual's inner sense of authority is. When Saturn is in Aries, reality kind of mirrors our own Saturn because we set the limits. Well, it is the expression of a sovereignty. What it is that we do with our sovereignty. What are the bounds, the boundaries for us personally to our sovereignty? So you can imagine how this will build up to the fact that physical reality in these next 2.5 years will mirror our own sense of limitation, boundary, our own Saturn. So this also means we have the most power over it. Because having power, authority, discipline, strength basically over the self and what the self does and which direction the self goes will in a way automatically translate to having the same effect on physical reality and everything that happens to us. What we want to see, what we want to focus on is ultimately what reality will give us. So this is why it's very, very important to understand what Saturn is doing in Aries and why it's doing it that way. And 0 degrees is also the world stage. So this has a strong collective expression. So I can imagine that what does sovereignty mean for different individuals? That will affect the collective. So this is an energy which indicates that powerful things happen in the collective, socially, politically, basically everything that is linked and based on the individual and what the individual wants, feels, needs, and the direction that they go towards in any way, shape, and form. But this Saturn is not solo here. We must not forget that for a second. Saturn is conjunct as soon as it enters, even before, with Neptune. Neptune is the spirit. Neptune is the dream. Neptune is the hope. Neptune is the goal that animates the head, the sense of direction, the sense of continuity, the reason for being alive, the survival, the survival instinct. The survival instinct isn't just something purely, how should I say, neurological. It is always also life as the source existing within us. It is also spiritual. It is also elevated. It is magical by its very design. And this is depicted by Saturn entering from the very last degree of the zodiac, 29 degree of Pisces, into the 0 of Aries. So it pulls, it closes a big cycle, and the 29 degrees of Pisces is the best symbol of the collective unconscious. Something needs to end in order for something new to be born. As I said, the embryo, that's 0 degrees of Aries. Spirit takes shape and form, the new, but in the now, in the real, it is growing like a seed when it starts growing. When it becomes like how you say it, like a sprout. Exactly that. That is what's gonna take place. But this May, this summer, we feel the first glimpse of it. It shows us the trajectory of where things are imminently gonna go in 2026. Our lives individually and collectively. It shows us one or maybe more trajectories options. Options, Uranus and Gemini. So if we stick to this path, things will go that way. If we stick to another path, things will probably go the other way. And as I said, this both individually and collectively. And that gives us time until 2026, the first month, to correct the trajectory. If there is something that we do not like, do not approve, do not wish for things to go a certain way, now will be the time to act. And also the foundations of the house symbolically. Before we lay the foundations, we double check that everything, the soil, everything, the legal side of things is all good to go. So this is the are we sure that we're going in that direction? And if we are sure, then we are making all the arrangements for our going there, the journey, the path forward to be as smooth as possible. So this is this period. But this is easy what I said. The reality of it, struggles will be there, survival will be there, fights will be there. It won't come. Revolution is in the air. Change, strong changes there. It's not going to be comfortable whatsoever, but that is the path forward. So a few things that I need to mention here. Saturn will go all the way up to 1 degree and 50, almost 2 degrees of sign of Aries. Then on the around the 13th of July this year will go stand still in the sky and go retrograde. It will retrograde out of Aries, so go back to 0 degrees of Aries, 29 degrees of Pisces around the 31st of August. So after this 31st of August until 14th of February 2026, it is really going to wrap up the past. Everything that needs to be eliminated, everything that needs to be dealt with, especially the collective unconscious, the true feelings of people, the past in any way, shape, and form that needs to be closed, needs to be closed. But this also means disillusion, absolutely. I didn't want to say this, but it's so spot on. So I'm going to keep this Freudian slip. It is a disillusion big time, but it also dissolving boundaries, dissolving that which was not permissive of the future that we need to invite in our lives, both individually and collectively. So this means embracing amends, looking at the ugly for what it is, embracing it, healing it, helping the situation, doing the right thing, embracing love. And individually, everything that karma involves, foreclosures, for releasing traumas or integrating them, or, also in a constructive sense. What are my dreams? Are my dreams representative of who life turned me into the now, the Aries energy of who I simply am? And if not, I need to adjust. Sometimes that adjustment means abandoning all, because something purely psychological, Pisces well, it can be abandoned once you're ready and embracing something new. And in 2020, because this energy needs to make sure that in 2026, when both of Neptune and Saturn will stay permanently in the sign of Aries, whatever they give birth to in a real sense is representative of us. And from this energy, I immediately need to speak about, when on one hand, Neptune, the dream. Neptune did this in the sign of Pisces as well, but in the Neptunian expression, purification. How much are my dreams aligned to my spirit, to my soul, to that inner identity who only I know of, that deep, that intimate, and to which degree were they aligned to something like external, fake aspirations, society's gains, society's judgments to fit in our own delusions, our own illusions, etc., etc. So that was like a powerful alchemy, including what do our traumas, our hurts, our pains, our disappointments, every moment in life when we were rejected or we failed or we let ourselves down, we were let down, the ugly, what did that do to us? How did that add, well, gold to our life story? Because it has to be gold. Because Pisces is also victim consciousness and victim mentality. And we know that that leads nowhere. We need to abandon the victim and embrace the survivor. That's evolution. Mother Nature does that. Without just what I said, the scorpion, spider, any arachnid you want, would still live at the bottom of the ocean and not be a land creature, a fascinating land creature that we know of. They needed to abandon everything, the water itself that gave them life and safety and everything, to embrace new territory, to become something that no cousin who stayed underwater could ever possibly become. So that's exactly Aquarius, getting out from the deep into new uncharted territory. Neptune demands that we let go of the victim consciousness and embrace the survival's dream. Even if it's a fata morgana, for now, it brings us forward. Even if it's just a mirage, it's a mirage that gives us strength to find the real oasis, to find the real source of water. Real happiness is not an option, because happiness is hand in hand with Aquarius. The good spirit, right? The highest aspiration, the star in tarot. It needs happiness. And that means Pluto and Aquarius, we need to see everything that ruins it, endangers it, spoils it, dirties it, etc., etc. So this is why Saturn and Neptune together in Aries work towards that. Neptune himself goes back to finish his job in the sign of Pisces, joins Saturn around the 22nd, 23rd of October 2025. So Neptune back at that 29 degree, the critical, the aneretic degree of Pisces, the victim consciousness, is making sure that we release the past. It's washing out. It's washing out our unconscious, creating new space for us to store experiences. The new dream, the new us. Everything that 2026 needs, the foundation that needs to be solidified already. Because the house is starting to build itself. And I also want to mention that Neptune comes back into the sign of Aries at that 0 degree, 27th of January 2026. So both Neptune and Saturn at the beginning of next year, the first 2 months, both of them return to Aries. So that's the moment when it's final, it's real. Jupiter in the sign of Gemini, having its final weeks, final days, it's making sure that we know what we choose. Knowing the self, knowing the other, even if the other doesn't mean one person, it means a whole world, the human society, knowing us, knowing the other. And why? Now, I would like to shift the focus to Jupiter, because Jupiter, well, we can see him that, oh, sorry. We can see that he is going through the last degrees of the sign of Gemini. Here we are on the 31st of May. Jupiter is at 28 degrees of the sign of Gemini. So moving on, around 6th of June, it will reach an erratic degree of Gemini. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is also very close to Jupiter, and the sun is in the sign of Gemini as well. So this is already a Gemini concentration, communication, news, mind, figuring out, travels. Jupiter at 29 degree may represent travel disruptions, may represent internet blockage, may represent problems with electronics, communication, information. It may also represent, a crisis which needs all of our intelligence and our connections, brother, sister, the colleague, any neighbor, cousin, sibling of any kind that Gemini represents to figure a situation out. This can also mean some big news, something big in technology. With Gemini, either polarity, a big fault, a big breakdown that needs to be addressed, and it's a big lesson, Gemini, for us, not to repeat, even if it's just purely technological, like, for example, the power grid crash in Spain. That needs to be studied, or something quite positive, a new revolutionary technology that you never in a million years saw coming, that it appears so quickly, that it's so fast, it's so groundbreaking. Or, well, Gemini, again, the ruler Mercury is in the sign and conjunct Jupiter. Maybe some communication with places we never expected to receive word from. Now, I don't want to name what I'm suspecting here, because, yeah, but who knows? News about, like, the Pentagon and unidentified spacecraft and objects and aviation, and that's definitely going to be there. But maybe it's more than just, well, Jupiter in Gemini, many times it's speculation, indirect deduction, truth, which isn't necessarily truth. Like, let me tell you an example. Astronomers suspected Neptune very many years before it was actually seen, discovered, real evidence of. Mathematical calculations pointed to the fact that Neptune exists. People were sure about it, even though they didn't have the physical evidence yet. Very much so like the Planet 9 or Trans-Pluto today. The calculations are there. indirect evidence points to that something is there, but we are yet to see it. So this is what we can imagine. But then around the 9th of June, look at this, Mercury conjoins Jupiter. Remember how Venus paved the way for Uranus into Gemini? Mercury paves the way the same way for Jupiter into Cancer. And remember, Mercury is also the ruling planet of the sign Jupiter is leaving. So I find this so beautiful that the mind, Mercury, is paving the way for Jupiter. Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, as I said, it loves being there. We are going to be feeling this family, the land, real estate, where we belong, unconditional love. We feel blessed and fortunate to have people around us, loved ones. This is a very, very loving energy. Okay, even when Jupiter gets lucky, right? When they say that Cancer, the crab, is not all that efficient in being consistent, let's say, being consistent at his career. Many times he needs to take a break or takes a step back, gets promoted, stays 2 years, realizes, nah, I prefer the previous roles, takes a step back. So back and forth. So Cancer doesn't move with great speed, doesn't need to. Every 12 years, Jupiter in Cancer, he grabs with the pincer the opportunity. The opportunity is bigger than what linear evolution would have granted Cancer, would he be consistent. So Cancer moves like that, pinches, grabs onto the lock to Jupiter, whatever Jupiter gives Cancer, and that propulses the Cancer way, way, way forward. So there's this energy. It's lucky not just for Cancer natives, but for everyone, really. However, let's move on to on the 10th of June, Jupiter is already in Cancer, 0 degrees, the world stage again. But Saturn and Neptune, as I said, are in Aries. I would want to move forward towards the, I don't know, 18th of June, some 20th of June. Those days, that week, or we can even call it weeks because this is longer term energy. When we see that both Jupiter conjunct the Sun are squaring Neptune and Saturn. Now, what does this square mean? Because it's not so comfortable. Remember back the realms of Jupiter in Gemini when it squared Saturn. Actually, Jupiter, before it leaves Gemini, it squares the nodes of the moon in Pisces. So that was what's true, what's not. Does my faith make sense to my soul, to my higher self, and also to my mind? So the Jupiter squaring the nodes of the moon in Pisces usually means abandoning faith that does not serve in any way or is illogical to the mind. The mind cannot be expected to live in blind dogma. However, this square in the sign of Cancer is a bit different because this square says the following. Saturn and Neptune, putting the foundations to the new us, our dream, survival, stability, sovereignty, going forward, evolution. Let's embrace, let's embody a much stronger Neptune, right? Sense of self, the big dream. Jupiter in Cancer with the square asks these planets, especially Neptune, that's absolutely wonderful, but make sure that your sense of direction, the big dream, the big ambition what you want to build is not a plunge to uncertainty. Because Jupiter in Cancer, you need somewhere to belong. Life has psycho-emotional needs, spiritual needs. You need a family, love, community. Not everyone is meant to be a hermit, right? By very design, the human being is social. Jupiter in Cancer highlights that parts of life where there is a lot of blessing, happiness, joy, well-being in that. So it asks Aries to take all of that into consideration before it pours down the long-term cemented foundation of the future, of the next 28, 30 years of our lives in a Saturnian way. And Neptune in the sign of Aries almost screams, keep it clean. If the foundations are solid, clean, moral, in accordance to who you know you are, feel you are, think you are, then the house is gonna definitely stand tall for many, many years and be able to pass down to children and the coming generation. If the foundation, Neptune's darker sense, delusion, corruption, the ugly, the filth, the unholy spirit within us, our own evil, or impurity, or madness, craziness, all of that is still Neptune. If the foundation is that, it will crumble. It won't even serve one lifetime, our lifetime. In 2 years, it will crumble. So the foundation has to be pure. Has purity determined by us. Because remember, the Aries expression is based on the sovereignty. So I find this very, very important. So thank you so much for listening. And I'll be back with further updates with the lunations and more about Uranus in the sign of Gemini. So thank you again. Until next time. Bye for now.